Welcome back to True Echo, the place where untold stories rise, dignity shines, and justice speaks louder than cruelty. Today's story will shake you to the core. What started as a cruel humiliation of a young black housekeeper by a wealthy socialite quickly spiraled into a stunning tale of quiet strength, public exposure, and redemption that no one saw coming. Stick with us, because by the end you'll witness one of the most powerful reversals of fortune ever told. It began like any other day, quiet, humid, and heavy with the weight of routines. In Lakewood Garden, a neighborhood with gates higher than dreams and secrets buried under designer hedges, the sun had not yet crested the rooftops when Aaliyah Brooks stepped into the morning. Her faded work shoes scraped softly against the concrete, her canvas tote heavy with responsibility, snacks for her little brother Jalen, backup gloves, and the resolve she wore like armor. The early shift at the Magnolia Grand meant she was used to being invisible. That's how people like her survived. Aaliyah had cleaned floors, wiped windows, and straightened pillows for the wealthy for almost 2 years, without complaint, without recognition, and certainly without thanks. But on that morning, invisibility shattered in an instant. A sudden splash, ice-cold, precise, humiliating, hit her like a slap. Clara Whitmore, draped in high-end athleisure and smug indifference, stood poised with her garden hose. Her voice, smooth like a venom-laced martini, floated across the manicured lawn. This street wasn't built for everyone. She turned on her heel, door clicking behind her, leaving Aaliyah dripping, stunned, and furious in silence. She didn't scream. She didn't cuss. She just stood still, chest rising with a single breath that carried years of learned self-restraint. Across the street, in a sleek black SUV parked beneath the shade of a maple, a man watched it all unfold. Malik Jensen hadn't planned to be there. He rarely visited properties without warning. But jet lag and a restless mind had him out before dawn, inspecting the new boutique hotel project he'd invested in just blocks away. What he witnessed, a moment of cruelty disguised as morning routine, cut deeper than he expected. It reminded him of his mother. Her name had been Della. She was a cleaner too. Strong back, silent pain, and eyes that never begged. The image of Aaliyah soaked but unbent stirred something long dormant in Malik. He tapped his Bluetooth once. "Find out who she is," he said. "The girl in the soaked uniform. I want to know everything." By the time Aaliyah clocked in, 4 minutes late, her uniform clung to her body in damp patches. The manager didn't care. He didn't ask. He saw a dirty appearance and reprimanded her sharply, as if she'd chosen to be drenched. There were no questions, only orders. No concern, only consequences. She changed quietly, wrung her braids over the sink, and faced her day like she always did, with grit, grace, and silence. No one saw her pain. No one asked. But in a quiet hotel suite far above her, someone was still watching, and this time they cared. The hotel's service corridors were long, narrow veins, unseen and uncelebrated, pulsing with quiet labor. Aaliyah moved through them with practiced rhythm, her body aching but her expression unreadable. She cleaned the east wing first, then the conference rooms. She polished brass, wiped invisible fingerprints, and scrubbed marble tile until her reflection looked back at her, faint but present. At noon, she sat behind the kitchen storage crates, tucked away from guests, finally able to breathe. Her sandwich was dry, her water lukewarm, but it was peace. She stared ahead, her mind blank, not dreaming, not planning, just surviving. 3 floors above her, Malik Jensen stared at a camera feed on his tablet. He hadn't meant to watch long. He just wanted to confirm she'd made it to work. But when he saw her on the grainy screen, eating alone, posture straight despite exhaustion, something held him there. She wasn't wallowing. She wasn't scrolling through a phone. She was still. Present. Quiet. She reminded him again of his mother, who used to come home from her cleaning job smelling like bleach and unspoken battles. Malik closed the tablet slowly. This wasn't pity. It was something older. Something he didn't let rise often. The next morning, before the lobby lights even warmed, Aaliyah opened her locker and froze. A brown paper bag sat there, plain but deliberate. Inside, still warm, was a breakfast sandwich. Beneath it, a new pair of thick cushioned work gloves. A card rested on top. To the woman who remains kind in a world that often isn't. There was no signature. No handwriting she recognized. But something unclenched in her chest. Not tears, those didn't come easily anymore, but something softer. She sat there on the locker bench for several quiet minutes, holding the warmth in her hands as if it could seep into her bones. Malik, in his penthouse office, watched the morning skyline slowly brighten. He didn't need to see her find the gift. He already knew it would matter. The next day everything changed. No announcement. No grand reveal. Just a curt notice after roll call. Aaliyah Brooks reassigned to VIP level. Report directly to Miss Danner at 6 a.m. It hit her like thunder, unexpected and dangerous. Promotions weren't handed out like that, not in silence. She looked around the break room. Most eyes avoided hers. Except one. Monique James, a senior housekeeper with 17 years under her belt and eyes like razors, crossed her arms and stared with sharp skepticism. That girl, she seemed to say without speaking. She hasn't earned that. Later, as Aaliyah poured stale coffee into a chipped mug, the murmur started. She must be seeing someone upstairs. No one gets VIP with 2 years and 0 connections. Did you see her the other day? Smiling like she owns the place. Aaliyah said nothing. She just tightened her grip on the mug. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the pressure of staying silent in a world designed to doubt her. She didn't ask for this promotion. She hadn't lobbied for it. But now she was being treated like she'd stolen it. The next morning, the VIP floor welcomed her like a new world. Everything gleamed. Air fresheners sprayed lavender, not bleach. Chandeliers glistened in the early light. Carpets were thick, plush, too thick for the push of her cleaning cart. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. She moved like a ghost, careful, measured. Not a smile. Not a whisper. Not a ripple. Until the man from the hallway appeared again. He was dressed casually in a navy shirt and slacks, sunglasses tucked into his collar. He held a slightly crumpled hotel map and looked strangely lost. "Excuse me," he said, "do you know the way to the garden deck?" Aaliyah blinked. Something about him was familiar. His calm gaze, the gentle authority in his tone. "Yes, sir," she said, gesturing softly. "Just past the elevators through the glass doors. There's a marble sign overhead." "Would you mind showing me?" he asked, not rude, just genuinely curious. She hesitated just for a second. "Of course," she replied. They walked in silence, her steps leading the way. Then he asked quietly, "Do you like working here?" She turned slightly. "It's a job," she answered honestly. "Not everyone dreams of mopping floors. But it keeps my brother fed, so I'm thankful." He nodded. "You do more than mop floors." She frowned slightly. "You carry yourself like someone the world couldn't break, even when it tried." His words landed unexpectedly hard. She blinked. "Thank you," she said softly. He smiled gently and disappeared down the corridor. She didn't know it yet, but that moment would echo louder than any whisper that came before. The next day began like a storm with no warning. A loud crack sounded through the staff radio. A VIP guest had fallen, just outside Suite 94. There was panic in the earpieces, static and urgency. A spill. A slip. A cleanup gone wrong. The floor manager barked orders, activating emergency protocols. A team rushed in, radios buzzing, faces tight with tension. And then the question dropped, heavy and cold. "Who cleaned this floor this morning?" All eyes turned. "Aaliyah," someone muttered. Not an accusation. A statement. Aaliyah's chest tightened. She stepped forward, heart pounding. "I used the standard solution. The one from the cart we all share." But Monique James wasn't done. "That's odd," she said, voice dripping with sweetness too thick to be real. "That bottle wasn't in my cart yesterday." The air in the staff hallway turned sharp. The manager didn't blink. Pending investigation, she's suspended. Just like that. No chance to explain. No benefit of the doubt. No inquiry into her record, which was spotless. Just a presumption of guilt, based not on evidence but on convenience. But before Aaliyah could take a step toward the exit, another voice cut through the corridor like a blade. "That won't be necessary." Gasp. Heads turned. Standing calmly in the hallway, dressed in a sharp slate gray suit and eyes full of quiet thunder, was Malik Jensen. For many, this was the moment his true identity clicked. "The footage has been pulled," he continued, tone even but laced with power, "from the last 12 hours. I believe the cause of the spill lies elsewhere." The manager stammered. Staff froze. Later, in a private room, the footage played. The truth spilled onto the screen like vindication in motion. Monique was clearly seen switching out the usual cleaning bottle in the supply room. Her face drained of color. She didn't deny it. There was nothing to say. She was escorted out that evening, suspended indefinitely. No one met her eyes. And Aaliyah? She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She thanked the supervisors quietly, walked to the janitor's closet, changed gloves and returned to polishing brass. Same posture. Same rhythm. Only Malik watched from the shadows now, arms folded. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth had been enough. But this was just the beginning. 2 days later, Aaliyah was summoned to the Skyview Lounge, an opulent space usually reserved for royalty, billionaires, and visiting dignitaries. She had never even peeked past the velvet rope. Now she was guided in. The chandeliers glowed golden. Jazz drifted soft as breath. And seated at a corner table near the windows, sipping still water from a crystal glass, was him. The man from the hallway. He stood as she approached. "No more pretending," he said with a smile. "My name is Malik Jensen. I'm the lead investor and regional operating partner for the Magnolia Grand and 7 other hotels in the state." She froze. Her breath caught. "You own this place?" "In part," he replied gently. Her knees nearly buckled. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. Her entire body felt like it was bracing for something unreal. "I've been watching, not in the way people fear, but the way people pay attention when they see something rare." He sat, reached for a sealed envelope and slid it across the table. "This," he said softly, "is a full scholarship. Hospitality management. Top-tier program. Tuition, books, transportation, covered. You'll work part-time here if you wish, but your mornings will belong to your future." Aaliyah's hands trembled. "Why?" she asked, voice raw. "Why me?" He met her eyes, steady and calm. "Because you never asked for anything. And because you've already shown what real leadership looks like. Strength without noise. Service without shame." Tears didn't fall, but her body felt like it exhaled for the first time in years. No one had ever opened a door for her like this. And now here it was, wide open. But in the shadows beyond that light, jealousy began to bloom. Clara Whitmore, scrolling through her phone that night in her penthouse suite, spotted a photo. Aaliyah Brooks, seated with Malik in the Skyview Lounge. Laughing. Smiling. Too close. Too comfortable. The same girl she drenched in the street? Sitting with the man she had been casually angling toward for months? No. This couldn't stand. Within 48 hours the blog post dropped. Anonymous, but poisonously precise. "Janitor Tio Jezebel," the headline read. The post accused Aaliyah of seducing her way into promotions, manipulating investors, staging accidents to get sympathy. It was cruel. Slick. Just believable enough. The damage was immediate. Whispers returned. Online comments exploded. Students in her program looked twice. Even the scholarship office reached out, asking if she had failed to disclose any personal relationships with donors. Her world tilted. Aaliyah didn't cry. She hadn't in years. But she stopped going to class. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her ID badge, wondering if everything she'd worked for could be erased with one rumor. But she didn't break. Not yet. Because someone else had finally heard the noise. The scandal spread like a fever. What started as a whisper in comment sections became wildfire in private chats, guest lounges, and staff elevators. Some called her a gold digger. Others said she had manipulated Malik. A few smirked as she passed. Others avoided her entirely. It wasn't just cruelty, it was exile. And Aaliyah, after so many years of walking through silence, suddenly felt the weight of being seen, but not for who she truly was. Even worse, her little brother Jalen was starting to ask questions. He noticed the way she stayed in bed longer. How she didn't hum while packing his lunch. How the glow that once warmed their tiny apartment seemed to flicker out. "What's wrong, Leah?" he asked softly one morning, his eyes wide and scared. She couldn't tell him the truth. That a lie, dressed up in polished words and pixelated cruelty, had stolen her joy. That even after surviving everything she had, one blog post threatened to unravel it all. So instead she forced a smile. "Just tired, baby. That's all." But Malik was not tired. He was furious. His phone buzzed nonstop with PR messages, legal opinions, damage control tactics. But Malik wasn't interested in spin. He wanted truth. And so, the next morning, under the glass dome of the Magnolia Grand's main atrium, he stood before a press corps hungry for blood, and gave them something else entirely. Cameras flashed. Microphones buzzed. And Malik Jensen, a man known for his calm composure and calculated tone, did something no one expected. He defended Aaliyah publicly. "The rumors circulating about Miss Aaliyah Brooks," he said clearly, "are not only false, they are cruel. She did not seduce her way into anything. She earned every opportunity through hours of unseen labor, through dignity, through discipline most of us only perform when someone's watching." He paused, letting the silence grow. "You don't need privilege to be worthy. And you don't need to be loud to be heard. Those words, simple, direct, but undeniably powerful, echoed across news sites, social media, and even daytime TV segments. By nightfall, the tide had turned. The same blogs that once amplified slander now scrambled to retract. People who had once whispered shame now whispered apologies. Students posted support. Guests left anonymous thank you notes in the break room. Aaliyah watched it unfold from the corner of her staff locker room. She didn't smile. But her shoulders, once weighed down by shame, sat straighter. And when the anonymous post was finally traced back to Clara Whitmore, everything cracked. Clara's father, a major donor and old money banker, was livid. He pulled her name from foundation boards, froze her trust, released a public statement of apology on behalf of the family. Clara herself? She said nothing. But the silence around her was enough. Her social invitations stopped arriving. Her friends stopped calling. And her precious blog, once a playground of elitist musings, was shut down for maintenance indefinitely. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived in hushes and withdrawals. Meanwhile, Aaliyah returned to class. Quiet. Focused. The difference now. People looked at her. And not with suspicion but with respect. No one whispered anymore. And in the background, Malik kept his distance, but never stopped watching her rise. The 25th anniversary gala at the Magnolia Grand was the kind of event Aaliyah once cleaned up after, not attended. But tonight she was on the guest list. She stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom in a simple midnight blue gown that caught the chandelier light like ripples on a lake. No designer label. No borrowed diamonds. Just poise. Quiet, earned poise. The room paused. Not because of glamour but because of presence. And when her name was called and she stepped on stage to accept the award for Transformational Impact in Service Culture, no one dared look away. She took the microphone slowly, looked out at the rows of glittering gowns and pressed tuxedos. Then beyond them, to the servers in the back. The ones in white gloves and black vests. The ones who stood exactly where she once had. She spoke. When I first walked into this hotel, I didn't expect anyone to notice me, she began. I had no degrees, no fancy name. Just a mop and a reason to keep going. She inhaled. The room listened. My mother used to say, even mud can bloom if it gets the right light. She was a housekeeper too. And she taught me that dignity doesn't come from titles, it comes from how you stand when the world would rather see you kneel. Her voice didn't tremble. She looked toward Jalen, seated near the front, eyes bright. My little brother, Jalen, you gave me the reason to keep walking. And to those who tried to cut my roots before I ever had a chance to grow, she smiled softly, not bitter, just true. Thank you for the soil. You didn't know it, but you helped me rise. The applause wasn't immediate. It built, rose, like thunder over still water. Not a performance, a reckoning. And in the back of the room, Malik stood with his hands clasped. Proud, but quiet. As always, he didn't want her to owe him anything. He just wanted her to keep blooming. The gala ended, but the memory of Aaliyah's speech lingered long after the last champagne glass was cleared. Servers whispered about it in the break room. Guests quoted it in their group chats. And online, a clip of her standing on that stage, graceful, composed, glowing with something that had nothing to do with wealth, circulated like wildfire. But Aaliyah didn't let it go to her head. The very next morning she was back in class. Pen in hand. Notes sharp. Eyes focused. There were new students now, ones who had transferred into the program after hearing about the scholarship. Some looked at her like a symbol. Others just watched. But she didn't perform for them. She stayed true to her rhythm, silent, precise, present. And every night, when she came home to their small apartment, she still packed Jalen's lunch for the next day. Still folded his socks. Still whispered affirmations into the darkness where dreams were too fragile to be loud. But something else had changed. There were invitations now. To speak. To advise. To lead. At first she said no to all of them. She wasn't interested in being a figurehead. But Malik encouraged her gently. Sometimes, he said during a quiet elevator ride, the people who've been hurt the most are the ones who lead with the most compassion. Don't rob the world of that. She didn't answer at the time. But the next month, she spoke at a leadership brunch for women in hospitality. And then again at a youth summit. And then again until she realized her voice mattered. Still, there was one last thing she hadn't done. She hadn't walked down that street again. Lakewood Garden. The place it all started. The place where dignity had been soaked and left to dry in the summer heat. Until one night after the gala she finally did. Her dress from the evening still clung gently to her frame. Her heels clicked softly on the cracked sidewalk as she turned the corner onto the block she once feared. The Whitmore house loomed quiet. The perfect hedges? Unkempt now. The lawn? Overgrown. The garden Clara had once prided herself on had withered under neglect. Except, one stubborn row of flowers remained, crooked, dry but still standing. Aaliyah paused, reached into her clutch, and pulled out a small bottle of water she'd saved from the gala. She knelt slowly, uncapped it, and poured gently at the roots of the flowers Clara had long abandoned. She didn't do it for Clara. Or for pity. She did it because she understood now, pain doesn't have to end in bitterness. Some things, like seeds, just need the right kind of attention to grow. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't have to look. Malik stood at the gate. Quiet. Present. Always showing up without asking for applause. She thought she was putting me in my place that day, Aaliyah said softly, still crouched near the flowers. She thought she was showing me where I belonged. She didn't know, Malik replied, his voice like dusk. She was watering something. Aaliyah rose, brushing her palms together. When she sprayed me down, she thought she was drowning a problem. But she was planting a future, Malik finished for her. They stood together in the stillness of the night. No flashing lights. No velvet ropes. Just two people who had walked through storms, now standing in the quiet soil of something earned. Aaliyah turned to him, a smile creeping slowly across her face. She poured water on me in mockery, she whispered. But I chose what it would grow. Malik didn't reply. He didn't need to. He reached out, not to guide her, not to pull her, but simply to walk beside her. And together they disappeared down the sidewalk, not into fame, not into headlines, but into the kind of peace you can only reach when you've walked through fire and come out blooming. The weeks that followed were different, not quieter but steadier. People in the hospitality world began mentioning Aaliyah's name with a tone of respect that couldn't be bought. Students in the program sought her guidance. Managers who once barked at her now greeted her with clipped politeness. And slowly her world expanded. Not because someone handed her a throne, but because she had built one, out of broken moments, bruised pride, and unshakable dignity. Malik remained present, though never overbearing. He showed up at events where she spoke. Checked in with her professor to see how she was doing. Sent flowers when her little brother made the honor roll. He never asked for anything in return. In truth, the bond between them was not romantic, not yet. It was forged in something deeper, recognition, respect. A shared understanding that comes only when you've both clawed your way through systems built to erase people like you. Still, their connection grew undeniable. One evening, as they walked side by side through the Magnolia Grand's rooftop garden, Aaliyah wearing her staff badge, Malik carrying a takeout bag, they paused under a canopy of golden string lights. The air smelled like summer rain and fresh jasmine. I've been thinking, Malik said quietly, about starting a program. A program? She asked. He nodded. For second chances, scholarships, internships, real support for women in housekeeping roles who've been passed over. Aaliyah stared at him, stunned. You want me to help design it? I want you to lead it. She froze. Malik, I don't have a degree yet. He raised a brow. Neither did I when I bought my first property. That didn't stop me. She laughed softly, the sound foreign to her own ears. You're serious. Dead serious. He took a folded proposal from his coat. Inside were her ideas, every one of them. He had been listening from the beginning. I don't want to build something for you, he said. I want to build something with you. And that was the moment Aaliyah realized, she was no longer fighting for space in someone else's world. She was about to create her own. Word about the new program spread fast. The Brooks Initiative, they called it. A mentorship and scholarship project focused on empowering hotel staff who often went unseen. Malik funded the initial launch, but it was Aaliyah's vision that shaped the curriculum. She gave workshops, met with city officials, partnered with women's shelters and job readiness programs. Suddenly, women who had spent years mopping floors with their heads down were walking into training rooms with their heads held high. And Clara? Well, Clara faded, fast. She was seen once in a downtown cafe, sunglasses on, sipping an overpriced iced tea no one cared to photograph. Her family had closed the tap. Her friends had moved on. Her blog domain was now a redirect page for Aaliyah's nonprofit. Poetic? Perhaps. But Aaliyah never gloated. She didn't need to. Because while Clara sat alone in her designer sunglasses, Aaliyah stood under spotlights she never asked for, surrounded by women who finally believed they could rise too. And each time Aaliyah looked into their eyes, women tired of being dismissed, disrespected, or drenched in cruelty, she saw a reflection of her own journey. Not bitterness, not revenge, just growth. Because some flowers bloom slow, but when they do, they change the garden forever. The official launch of the Brooks Initiative was held in the same grand ballroom where Aaliyah had once received her award, and once again she stood on that stage. But this time she wasn't the underdog rising. She was the architect, the leader, the symbol of something far greater than herself. Rows of seats were filled with executives, staff members, single mothers, immigrant workers, and volunteers who had found hope in her story. At the back, near the exit, just like before, stood the quiet ones. The housekeepers still on shift. The janitors who had snuck in on their break. And those were the ones Aaliyah looked at when she spoke. "I used to believe that success meant becoming someone else," she told the crowd. "Someone more polished. Someone wealthier. Someone who didn't carry the weight of working-class silence." She paused. "But now I know, you don't have to become someone else to rise. You just have to remember who you are, and never let anyone wash that away." The applause came in waves. But again, it wasn't the loudest claps that reached her. It was the quiet tears, the nods, the small whispers of thank you, that echoed most. After the ceremony, Aaliyah stepped out onto the balcony. The evening sky stretched wide above Lakewood Garden, that same neighborhood where this had all begun. The same cracked sidewalks. The same old oaks. But it didn't hold power over her anymore. She was no longer afraid to be seen. Malik joined her, a wine glass in hand, not for ceremony but for comfort. "You changed something," he said. Aaliyah glanced at him. "I just did what I had to do." "No," he said softly. "You did what most people are too scared to even attempt." She leaned on the railing, eyes locked on the street beyond. "You know what I think about most?" she asked. "What?" "That hose water wasn't meant to grow anything. But I made it bloom." He smiled slowly. "You didn't just bloom. You built the soil, planted the seed, fought the weeds, and kept growing when no one else watered you." They stood in silence for a moment, wind brushing against them like a soft memory. Then Aaliyah pulled a folded note from her clutch and handed it to him. Malik raised a brow and unfolded it. Inside, a handwritten message. To the man who saw the mud and still believed something could bloom. His voice caught in his throat. "You kept it. I never forgot what kindness looks like when it's not performative," she said. "And what it feels like to finally be believed in." Their hands brushed briefly, not a promise, just a recognition. Of what was. Of what might be. Of what didn't need to be named yet. Aaliyah turned and walked back inside. She wasn't the same girl who got drenched on that sidewalk. And the world would never see her that way again. In the garden outside the ballroom, a new set of flowers had just been planted, row after row of white lilies and midnight blue irises, her mother's favorites. Right beneath the dedication plaque. "For those who rise with quiet strength and help others do the same." Aaliyah Brooks no longer worked in the shadows. She was the light now. And no amount of cruelty, money, or high society mockery would ever dim her glow again. Sometimes, the water meant to shame you is the very thing that helps you grow. Aaliyah's story reminds us that silence isn't weakness, and dignity is not for sale. When someone tries to put you in your place, you decide what grows from there. As Aaliyah said, even mud can bloom if it gets the right light. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own journey, subscribe to True Echo. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their roots are strong, even if the world tries to bury them. And tell us in the comments, what would you grow from the mud they left you in?